Hi, good morning. How's audio?
It's fine.
How's the audio?
Can you do the presentation on the back?
They're probably gonna put it all sides. Yep.
I'm gonna text you at home. Be like, what?
How is
I
audio?
thought you did.
Yeah, I was shocked.
I didn't hear you. What time you get?
You get your signed resolution back from them, right?
Yes.
Okay, forwarding this to you from
So there was a delay.
Oh.
We
what
had
is
a delay
it?
because when I go.
How is audio? Good morning.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
I'm going back to the beginning.
You hear it?
You can hear it?
And I couldn't test
Fine. Sounds great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys bring your fan?
Yeah, we should have.
Is there anything?
Dollar store picking them up?
Diesel would have.
Good morning. How you doing? Nice to see you.
Oh, no, it's Tuesday, Thursday.
It's all good. It's okay.
I'm good, how are you? That's right, girl.
Can you go stand on the fence for us real quick? An anvil's not going to fall on your head, I promise.
Probably.
Can you shift the camera? Awesome.
Yep, we're doing it.
Thank you. Do you want to see what you look like on camera? Go look at the screen. Oh,
No, it makes you look.
I know you're talking about.
That's super pro, right? Good morning, YouTube. It's live right now.
That's probably the size levy.
Great presentation last night. Was that a great presentation last night? Oh, yeah. Short and sweet. That's what I like. A lot of work. Short and sweet. Oh, yes.
Mr. Brown.
Good morning. How are you? Sit by me.
Miss that by you.
Stretch out on the couch.
Hello.
They're not. It makes you have very good posture.
Stay too long.
Right. We don't want you to get too comfortable. It's right here. It's right here.
Oh, they use church fans?
Right.
It's good. That's fine. Just double check. Yep. What else are we going to say?
Sorry, ma'am.
Where would you like?
Smile every day.
I know.
See, you thought it was just me.
I've never been happier. You know, you look at your career.
Did I spell that right?
Just starting
I did not. 2 T's. Yep, 2 T's.
finally
Oh, okay.
63 new days and
Wow.
Yeah, if you're going to capitalize it.
That's what I used to tell my daughter. She would beg to get
Does it tell you how many
you're hard work. Once you start working, you have to work the rest of your life. So put it off as long as you can. Go to school, enjoy being a kid. You know, grades are your job.
Hey, welcome. I was gonna say there's room over here too.
Yeah.
Church fan.
so
Sarah just deleted me, so I need to leave.
Do we still have access to the go-to website? Because I'm just thinking.
I love that church fans.
Turning around.
You know how
The
they
little pamphlet, the little, they got program on the couch. And it's funny, I have a fan of my first, and I have fans of my best, you know, like vendors, you know, like at conferences.
No way.
Yeah, first is really great.
Really?
The air conditioner went out in my house.
Wow.
I
gave
I
all
took
one
last
for my
night
son.
at
I have one, it's 90.
It gives you
my house is very
6
cold.
It does.
There's no
Because that's
window.
what
Yeah, okay.
Good
Good job.
Right.
So I can't, I leave no door open.
Right.
I used to when I first moved there, but I won't.
Yes.
anymore.
I'm gonna stand over here with you. You know what?
Hi, how are you?
It's good.
All the cool chicks.
Do you need a fan?
Yeah, because if you stop the song.
I know that's what they said. It's always they have fans downstairs.
Oh, I know. She's on her way
Oh
out.
yeah, mine's better.
I don't even have one. Well, I have my little
She'll probably get in
electrical one.
Yeah, like we could.
Hi. Oh, it's actually cooler right here. Yeah, it's cooler right here. Go in my office. Tell her to have a
Kind of
window.
windows locale. Yeah. Just out there outside.
Perfect. Cute.
Yeah, I like that outfit. That's very cute. And those shoes, dude, we were
Comes out always looks amazing.
They're a little high for me though. They are comfy.
It's only $17.
Emma's gonna be
On Monday.
like,
You're always looking for me.
I'm serious.
Every single beat of the sweat is recorded in real time.
We've staken out seats.
This is a good spot.
It is. Dude, it's like planes. Yeah. That's what it
And
was.
Cheryl's fanning.
I would do that with a fan.
That'd be great too.
Oh, they're downstairs still fussing.
Last time I thought over there, someone stood right in
Oh,
front of
just
me, so.
in general.
The king came in after the chat was over.
It's just the topic of the day.
It's Wednesday.
You know, I'm starting to think that my mom should dress me every day, which I never get compliments except for the days that she dresses me.
Really? I take it that those are death threats.
Yeah.
I take my son over to the airport all the time. Is that where it is?
There we go. You take over.
Yesterday she was in like bright yellow.
Do you mind if I walk my son?
Caution.
Yeah, I'm sure. She walked through any forest yesterday saying,
We always eat at the
yes, thank you.
You are neon green today, and I love it. I love lime green.
Oh, really?
I flew through tissue paper.
I know.
I didn't actually.
Let's go up, Steve.
Yeah, well, Gloria,
What up?
Gloria's
Hey, so how was Star Wars Land?
I was not expecting to like it. Even if Star Wars, she opened it, but I'm not
Right.
I didn't know that was in fact.
Oh, is that what
I had a question and I totally forgot what it was because I was listening to you talking
this is
Star
my
Wars and
Star
stuff.
Wars.
And, okay, I'll remember it when I'm back.
So,
Ross.
But,
And she
Oh, no,
wrapped
it's Peter's Ross.
we
Oh, yeah, Peter's Ross.
And she actually had like, it's all organized by color,
that and then every once in a while we do
different color
flows
papers.
over that.
So she knows that she wrapped green Peter top and a green hair pants. She's
dotted green fox.
She's a grandma.
Oh, she
So immersive.
Ginger ass.
She even has her jewelry
her
coordinated with
jewelry
the
coordinated.
Holy cow, she's a boss.
Yeah.
I think
In
it's
the
supposed to
best
be
possible
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's
not
supposed to
bad.
be like
No,
tools,
that's beautiful.
but it's like her jewelry.
Stormtroopers have taken over
No,
all
it's
of
like
it.
a toolbox.
It's like a toolbox.
Oh, I see.
That's right in line. That would be like
There's I just did this.
She had a garage sale today. And so it was like on the platform. We know it's about
So if you're a person that's like, well, when I buy something, it's not going to buy it. When they see so much product, it's so
And I counted 150.
I'm gonna dump this. I'm gonna dump this.
Oh,
I'm gonna throw this.
thank you.
That was awesome. A bunch of those. Yeah. This made my day.
I started to laugh right as I was. Right? That's why I intentionally put my face back into my phone. Oh man, I'm sorry. I needed to see that actually. Are they still over there?
For the kids.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
No, it's all because Chris and that's where walking around out there.
And she, it was both. You know, because if you're teaching for something else, I mean, I don't even think they make them that small. That'd be any issue.
Yeah, I was fine.
At least it takes out your nose.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
I stopped myself, but I have come so close. I've some issues that I just love, especially for like, you know, like back in the day, hot feet, leather heel,
One out, it does that now.
or none, didn't have the buttons. And then when I stopped myself,
I think it's so weird about them now.
I know, mine
But
are
it's
way
weird.
subscribed.
I have it about long term right now. They're in the box. It's sitting there.
But I don't know if you want to.
I haven't worn them in years, but
I finally heard,
1 second.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
I was in the car for like 30 minutes on the phone. So I did my makeup in the car. How does it look?
On one side it's great.
That was great. I just had to make sure I got my hair because I knew you'd make fun of me.
That come up in board meetings. Last night we had our last board meeting for the year of 18-19 school year. So staff, at least from cabinet level, were relieved that we're now have to wait a month for the next board meeting. But it was, as you can imagine, a full agenda because it is the only meeting in June. And with the calendar change, a lot of things had to fall really very different from last year as far as you remember the change of the calendar, we used to have July and August be the two months that are not as used as far as days for instruction, and now it's June and July. That shifts things and makes June meeting very hard to do because many of the stuff are done by then. So with that in mind, I would like to start with probably the most exciting news, which would come from HR because it's appointment of positions and movement of people within the district into different seats to lead and to be ready for next year, 1920. And I'd like to invite Assistant Superintendent of HR, Kylie, to tell us all the exciting news about that.
Good morning. You know, it's before I start and tell the good stuff, I do want to start this. You know, it's been such a beautiful, nice 60, 70-degree weather, maybe 80 for the last couple weeks. Well, how many of you have heard of Reef? Ready? Monday, Reef had its annual golf tournament. And it was 104? It was, maybe higher. And I had, graciously thinking, oh, okay, we'll go out and play golf. Ryan Lewis, Dr. Lewis, had convinced me that this would be great. It would be fun. Yeah. As I had the ice towel wrapped around my head all day wondering how we were going to get through the rest of the interviews that afternoon, because some of the positions I'm going to tell you about actually got to interview, and that's why I'm sharing about Reef, with Dr. Lewis and I that afternoon as we came in from the golf tournament, soaking wet. So you can imagine how great we smelled, because there was no air in the district either. So, it was just one of those days, but it actually made for a great story. So with that, we do have, it's that time of year, our department is just going crazy with a ton of support from many of you. But we have gotten through some of our interview process, and we were able to take to the board last night some positions that, as they'd gone through the process, had made it through level 2 and had been selected. So I would like to be able to share some of that. And a lot of it is a domino, so you're going to have to go with me. Last night I started in backwards order, and people were like, wait, what? Why are we getting a new principal for that school? Where did the person go? So I'm going to start backwards and share with you where some of the people who were sitting in those positions have gone. So as you all know, Dr. McGuire has retired, so the Director of Pupil Services was opened. Well, Raul Ayala, who is the current principal of Shamawa, had gone through the process, and he was selected to be the new Director of Pupil Services. So he will be leaving the site and going over to Pupil Services. So I know that they're excited over there to have him. He's done a lot of work with restorative justice at Shamawa. He's done a lot of different things to try to implement different processes to support the students' needs. So we're hoping that he'll be able to carry that and shed that light for all of the other schools too in their support. So that left Shamawa open. So that was the interview process that we did after the golf tournament. So With that being said, we had a process and we had a candidate who is actually in-house who'd made it, and Gerardo Arenas, who's the current assistant principal at Arlington High School, will be the new principal at Shamawa. He has been an assistant principal at King and at Arlington, and prior to coming to Riverside Unified, he was an assistant principal at a middle school in San Bernardino. He also has background in teaching, both at the probation school setting and in a history setting at the comprehensive schools. So we're excited for him to be able to join the next stage or phase in his career as principal. So that took care of that piece. Now we have the next domino. We have PGS principal. Some of you might have known that Cheryl Simmons is retiring, and Esther had decided to go back, and she's actually took on a position that is very similar, but it's a coordinator of English learners, which has always been a real passion and dream for her. So she has this opportunity just to focus in now on English learners. So she's come back to the district office per se, and that left the principal of PGS open. So we went through that process, and Tricia Tran was selected. She is the current principal of Alcott, and she was selected to be our PGS principal support coach. And she comes again to Riverside from Garden Grove as a principal. She has been an assistant principal, so there's a ton of instructional experience that she brings to that next phase in her life as she starts to coach new principals in their position. So that left Alcott open. Well, we had already done a recruitment pool for elementary. And so in that recruitment, we kind of had it stacked up. We had hired Don Brawley, and then we had, knowing that if we had another opening, we already had people that we had thought would be able to go in through that process. We just didn't have the positions opened at the time. So Terry McAndrew, who is currently the assistant principal at Lake Matthews, will now be going to be the principal at Alcott. So she's extremely excited. Again, she comes to Riverside, she's been an assistant principal at Lake Matthews. Prior to that, she was an assistant principal in San Bernardino City. Teaching experience, she has a wealth of knowledge also in working with categorical programs, working with different instructional programs that she'll bring to support Alcott. So that left us, let me see, what do we have left? Oh, we have one more that we did, and that was the director of curriculum and instruction. Felicia Cruz Delgado has taken a position at Riverside County Office of Education, so that left an opening in instruction. So with that, we've gone through the process, and on Friday, Sean Curtin was selected as the new director of curriculum and instruction. So he'll be coming down to the district office in that capacity, and that will leave. Now we'll have another middle school domino. As you see, HR personnel, we're always picking up those dominoes. So we now will be starting a recruitment for that position. So those were the ones that came out of closed session as management. You'll also see that we'll be sending out a news flash with a number of other positions that were on the consent agenda. So we've been quite busy. We probably have about 14, 15 management positions that just in this time span have been filled, from program specialists in special education to different positions in maintenance and operations. So we'll get that news flash out shortly, but that kind of gives us where we've been with regards to recruitment. So are there any questions with regards to that? Okay. Because I'm not even going to attempt to talk to you about CFDs, because I don't even know what that stands for. I just know it means like fees and money and.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Congratulations to all of the appointments. I'm very excited that we are having to build capacity and have people in our district that have the qualification to move and serve in different capacities and higher positions and promotions. So very excited, and welcome to all the new members from outside of our district, because Riverside is a great district to be at. CFDs, can I ask the question, does anybody know what CFDs are? Shelley? Yes, you must be paying those taxes in your community. So community card. Starbucks card. Community facility districts is when a developer comes in town, they want to build homes, they have the opportunity to pay fees for the district, because those homes most likely will generate students. So students will need classrooms, so the current schools would need to be upgraded, or building new schools if it's a huge community, right? So they have the opportunity to pay the district fees, developer fees. But then there's also another opportunity to do is, if they don't pay those fees up front, they actually can incorporate them in a tax that gets levied in a proportional manner on all of these homes' property taxes. So CFDs usually is a tax, if you've heard of it, as Melarus for that development, and it's only for those properties to pay the fees over a period of time. So what happens, the district negotiates an agreement and they get actually a little bit of a higher level and for them to go through that process and be ready in a more timely manner for the students of that development. So we have many CFDs. We have almost 30 CFDs in the Riverside Unified. And every opportunity that we get, we try to work with developers to continue to have development in Riverside, especially that we're declining enrollment. Any development that brings students, we are welcoming. And so we work with them, and CFD 35 was on the agenda, and that's the formation of a new CFD for about 63 homes. And it takes about 4 items to form a CFD. It takes a public hearing if anybody is objecting to it. It takes the formation resolution, the levying of the taxes resolution, an election process that takes place. So 4 items for one CFD, and that is a formation of a new one, 35. That means we have 34 currently. We also had one item for another CFD of 29. So 29 was a development of 2 different areas in our district, and one got developed, and the second area ended up being sold to a different developer. So they wanted to undo that agreement. The reason being that developer doesn't necessarily want to do it through an agreement. They want to pay the fees as they happen. So it just depends on the developer, and we'll work with them if they don't want it to be a tax on the property. We are also happy to receive the fees in our office over the window. So that's the 2 CFDs. Any questions on that? Did that make sense? No?
I'm just curious, what's the difference between that and maybe commercial? Do we get anything from commercial?
We do. They're just different fees, lower fees for commercial, because they most likely will be needing support from the district, but not necessarily because of kids in our schools. So they get a lower fee. Special education annual service and budget plan. So when we take the budget, the adopted budget, because it's not on the agenda, the adopted budget and the LCAP were approved yesterday. The reason why they're not on the agenda probably because they didn't get a big time in the meeting, because we did the presentation in May, and there was no changes for the LCAP or the budget. But since Jason is here, he can come up and talk about the segment that took place yesterday, which is the special ed piece of the budget and the service plan, which is a requirement. Do you want to go to the X? Welcome, Jason.
Good morning. All right, so my name is Jason Ramirez, for those of you that don't know me. I too am a fan of hot weather, typically, Kylie, except when my air conditioning went out yesterday. And at the same time, my wife, has a very generous heart, decided to dog sit for our friend. And my daughter also has a generous heart, decided to dog sit for her friend. So we had a total of 3 dogs, and they decided to put them in the house to keep them outside of the shade. Well, with no air conditioning, I came home last night with 3 dogs in our kitchen and a house that really smelled gross. Because, yeah, so I think we'll hopefully give the dogs a bath to help cool them off and maybe clean them up a little bit. So special education at last night's board meeting had 3 very important items. Our annual service plan and our annual budget plan. Those 2 items are required by the Department of Education for every SELPA, which is our special education local plan area, to have approved by the board and sent into CD by June 30th. So the service plan just really outlines the services that we anticipate students with special needs will require next year, and it just outlines each of the services and whether we're using them or not utilizing them. And also along with which school site they'll be utilized at. And there's a lot of flexibility in that. Obviously, students with IEPs require services, we'll provide them at that school site. So it's just an anticipated plan for next year. Along with that is our annual budget plan, and the annual budget plan just lays out the budget we anticipate for next year, all of our expenditures for students with special needs, and it breaks it down into mild, moderate disabilities, moderate, severe disabilities, low incidence disabilities, and things like that. So that was approved, and we'll be going to CD June 30th. So before I go to the next item, any questions on that?
Is that public
Can you review that? Can the public see that report?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was, we had a public hearing for it prior to it's published on the board agenda. So that's probably the easiest way to get it. I actually have a copy here. I'll give it to you on my way out if you'd like one. So the other item was our Community Advisory Committee. Special Education per Ed Code has a Community Advisory Committee of parents and various stakeholders. And their role is really to advise special education and the board from a parent perspective what the priorities are. So they had a year in review, great little PowerPoint to look at. They had a lot of activities that were hosted, a lot of parent trainings for parents with students with disabilities. And we also took some parents up to Sacramento to lobby some bills for additional special education funding and to address things like the teacher shortage and preschool funding, because we also educate students with disabilities who are ages 3 to 5. So the parents loved it. It's a great trip, really gives them a good experience. We met with Senator Roth, Assemblymember Medina, Assembly Member Sabrina Cervantes, and we spent a couple days up there, very powerful, and it's a good experience to see how laws are created, and we get to visit the Capitol building and have a good day of fun. So any questions on that? Perfect.
Thank you.
You're up, Maze. Thank you.
So good segue into the next item. Every program has their advocates, right? So special ed, we're thankful for their committee that goes up and specifically advocates for special ed enforces. But we also, as a district, have a legislative committee that have also finalized what we call principles for how we're going to do our advocacy, and the platform for this specific year, which is 1920, what are we going to concentrate on? So principles of advocacy is things like everything that we're going to advocate for is going to be for the best of the students in the preschool through K-12 and adult school, right? So that's what, and then the whole document, if you want to see it online, goes through what principles we're going to carry as we do the advocacy. The platform is what specifically we're going to concentrate on of the issues that are in legislation this year coming up. So we took 5 areas of category that we're going to concentrate on as far as efforts. Special education is one of them, but funding for base grants is another. And that's because base grants is more equitable to school districts. And within base grants, we're going to also advocate to try to avoid having the increases in costs for pensions, STRS, PERS to be impacted to the district. We are going to advocate that they find money, just like this year, Governor Newsom have found other than Prop 98, which is how we get funded for school districts. He found outside of that funding to alleviate some of the increases in those costs to us. So we're going to continue to advocate. The work had generated some fruit this year, and they did lower our cost of increases. So special ed funding, career technical education is going to be also concentrated on. School facilities bonds will be concentrated on, and mental health. So those are the 5 categories. The school facilities bonds is because the voters have voted for bonds at the state level, but if you remember, our previous governor was so conservative and has not issued bonds, and what we're doing is advocating for the new governor to issue the bonds so that way our facilities projects could be funded with the 50% match from the state. And then mental health is for our students and everything that's happening with the new age technology, social media. We're finding that our students at all levels need support to continue to have wellness and mental health. And so that's going to be our advocacy level there. And career technical education is something that we should be doing all the time as to continue to be a college and career ready district. So those are that was approved under the platform and the principles. Census resolution is a little bit unique that we took a resolution to support the collection of data for the census of 2020. And the reason being is it might be looked at as a social action, because usually this falls under the state or the county level to collect the data for the census. And our district would like to support that effort because the federal government allocates dollars to the state based on the census data. And so when the allocation from the federal government is allocated based on a higher number in California. If every person is captured through the census data, then ultimately districts will benefit from that through several different programs that gets allocated based on our enrollment and our free and reduced. But the pot of money gets increased to California if we have a better census number that is higher. And most likely, if we encourage the capturing of all of the individuals in California, including kids, we probably get bigger pots from these particular areas, the National School Lunch Program, transportation, a lot of different areas that gets allocated to California from the federal funding. So we will be sending this out to all of our parents, letting them know that we support the census collection data. The last item, is there a second page? Okay, so that is the last item, is 2019. How fast can we forget yesterday, right? Like, we lived through it till, I don't know, 10 o'clock or so. So 2019 use of facilities fee schedule. We saved this item the best for last. We actually moved this item first because there was a very full audience in the boardroom. There was like maybe 300 people in the boardroom that came to protest the increase of fees for our facilities. And so I would like to give you just a little bit of context for that. From a perspective of a partner in our community that does clubs or does sports or programs, it looks like the district is not valuing their programs when we increase fees. And so therefore they came and said, what? Aren't you valuing our program? And we're doing this for the kids that are in your district for the most part. And when we do something like this that might sound crazy, it's not really because we don't value the program. It's because we continue to need to look at our cost. And if we are in a position where we're not receiving funding from the state at the level that we used to, we're in a position that we just went through a stabilization budget process to cut $11.3 million to happily say that we balance the budget and we will get a positive certification from the county and the state. But it took hard work of cutting $11.3 million and continue to have those cuts away from the classroom and away from having to hurt our programs to the best of our ability, and no layoffs to the best of our ability, and no create commotion and crisis in the district. So when you go through a process like that, you cannot avoid having to make sure that everything that you do is efficient. So when you haven't looked at use of facilities, like when a church or a nonprofit organization or a club uses a multipurpose room or a field, and we have costs to recover, to make sure that we are neutral, that we are not taking money from general fund that is supposed to be for the kids of the district for the instructional day or after hours for after school programs. You cannot really have a program like having to be under the civic center, a good partner to the community. You can't have it be subsidized by general fund. So when you look at the cost and you haven't touched them in a few years, and you realize those costs are actually not covering our basis, a custodial cleaning fee, the lighting, the air condition if it's a multipurpose room, the fields and the maintenance of the fields if it's an actual turf, you cannot help but do that analysis. That's required for us to make sure that we're not giving a gift of public funds. And so those fees were updated, methodical process were taken in consideration, and the fees changed drastically. As you know, everything is going up, right? I mean, electricity, utilities, everything is going up. So you can imagine that the fees are going to go up. So we had heard the group, and we understand that we want them to continue to be partner with our district. And so what we ended up doing is still approve the fees because it's the right thing to do. We don't want to impact general fund negatively. But we phased it in so they have an opportunity to educate their parents and have their budgets adjusted accordingly. So it was, to me, a win-win for both partners and the school district because we still did what we were supposed to do and make sure that we safeguard the general fund. But we also worked with our groups to give them some phase-in period so that way they can adjust their budgets accordingly. So that's the item that probably took the most attention in the boardroom and the most time. Any questions about any of the items? No questions? It was all clear and all. I know as an English language learner, I know I'm not clear all the time. So,
We're
but
concise, Maze.
so Dave, you have a question. I do. That's a celebration. But don't you have a question? You seem like you have a question. Okay. All right. So Dave is bringing to my attention that I should do this celebration. Every year, our PTA comes up at the change of the officers, and the outgoing president gives a check to the district. So this is our check for this year. What this represents is all of the volunteer hours that the parents have done in every single school site in our district has been calculated at the level of the average hour for, if that work was done by somebody in the district, how much would have we paid that employee? And they took those average hours and calculated them, and it's $1.7 million. So if and actually they made sure they said the $734,682.02 because it is a big deal. If all of that work that was done was necessary for the kids, and if we didn't have our parents do it, we would have had to do it and pay for it. And so therefore it is a true savings of 1.7 plus dollars to our district, and we thank PTA and all of their work, that continuous work that they do in our district. And congratulations to the new president, and Adriana, we're gonna miss you. And I think we covered it all. Dave, did we cover it all? Okay, good. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for all that you do. And I'm so glad this is the last board meeting, and we're gonna take a break for a month and then come back in July. And have a wonderful summer. Enjoy the heat. Yeah. Oh, please don't go before you take cake for the birthday celebrations. If anybody would like to celebrate with us.
Donuts, cake, what else?